Hello and welcome to the fourth video of converting Tronxy X5SA to a decent printer. This time around I want to talk about belt, tensioners, pulleys and as a bonus, potential upgrades that you may do in the future. As I mentioned in the previous video, before you can actually tighten the belt, you will need a carriage for a print head. There are pretty much infinite choices here, and even if there is nothing to suit your needs, you can remix one of those designs that are available in VzBot repository. As you can see, I have remixed a couple of designs into one that allowed me to mount BQH2V2. If you are building from the scratch, however, I would recommend going for the mount for the Hextrudort. And as always, you can visit the Discord, which is a good place to find mountings for different print heads. Important part is to tighten up the MGN9 carriage before you start cutting your belt. Otherwise it may turn out that one belt is different length than the other and you will have an issue with squaring Gantry. There are two great sources to look up a belt path. First is the official VzBot assembly manual and second is the 3D model. After routing the belts, make sure to leave some extra in case you will need to loosen it up. Also make sure that your motor tensioners are in a maximum relaxed position so that you will have some space for adjustments. As for how tight belts should be, I can't really answer your question. You will need to check out on the videos and adjust it roughly. You can always correct that later, assuming you left some extra belt. Once you cut the belt and route it properly, attach it with the clips like I will show you here. Check with your finger the tension of both belts. Use the back thumb screw to move the motor so that the gantry is squared and both belts have similar tension. Don't forget to tighten up two bolts on each side of the top of the motor mounts after the whole procedure is done. Last part will be tightening GT motor pulley on the motor shaft. This is fairly straightforward process but also a bit tedious. Move around gantry back and forth and make sure you don't hear any strange noises coming from the belt. If you do, check on which side it does occur and try to adjust the position of the GT pulley on the motor shaft until you will no longer hear any noises. Once you confirm everything is alright, tighten the two set screws and your gantry should be done. Important thing to note is that GT pulley on one side is upside down, and this is something you can see on the 3D model. Now that you have your cheap VzBot completed, let me explain some of the things that can be upgraded. The reason why I don't want to talk about electronics yet is because this is a point where you may consider opting out of the stock Tronxy motherboard. Biggest problem about the Tronxy motherboard is that connector to the printhead is completely proprietary. There are some workarounds to connect custom hardware to it, but it will be a bit of a painful experience, especially if you did not receive breakout board like I did. Another problem is that it only has 4 stepper motor drivers, and that means you cannot have a Z tilt. Also, while it's perfectly possible to run Clipper on it, it requires some soldering to make use of UART Mod for the stepper motor drivers. So honestly, in my opinion, upgrading the board is the first and most important upgrade you can make. If you are really low on the budget, something like SKR 1.4 for $38 with 5 stepper drivers should be good enough. That would bump the entire build from $350 to around $380. If you intend to make it into a project printer, go straight for the Octopus or Octopus Pro. Stock motherboard is viable only if you are completely broke. Second most important upgrade is the probe. Trust me when I say this. I had so many issues with Tronxy probe I had to live level every single print in order to not scratch the bed and make sure it sticks to the print surface. It was always wrong, plus minus 0.3 millimeters. I did print myself a Quickdraw probe from Annex Engineering, however it does have some issues, so I cannot recommend it unless you are tech savvy and can fix it yourself. Unironically, I do recommend some optical or mechanical probe like CR Touch. While you probably won't experience any issues with BL Touch, I just don't want to hear about anything inductive or magnetic and will never use such probes myself again. Mechanical probes based on a micro switch are good, but they need some extensive macros to set up. And third upgrade is the bed. Stock Tronxy Aluminium bed is 3 mm thick, and it bends even with the slightest pressure. While it's perfectly fine to print on it if you trust your probe, however it quickly became a living nightmare with an inaccurate stock probe. Best thing you can get in this category is a cast aluminum machined bed, either from the AliExpress or F3D Racing. I did cut some corners here and I have ordered a sheet of aluminum cut to a size and drilled hole myself. People say that cold rolled aluminum will bend over time, however, I do have this bed for around 2.5 months and I have yet to see any wrapping. It also did cost me around $17 instead of $65. In my opinion, it is still far ahead of the stock bed that is already bent. Those 3 upgrades are something I consider essential, meaning it will save you a lot of headache if you just want to print reliably. Next upgrades is something more of a fluff, and they aren't really necessary, but they are either boosting your print speed or making your frame more rigid or just adding another layer of quality of life. I will go in order of how good the quality of life is, taking it into consideration the price. So overall value of an upgrade. First on that list will be a corner brackets and an enclosure. You can buy corner brackets for just a couple of dollars, and it will add a lot of rigidity to your frame. Even the 3D printed ones make the entire frame a lot more stable. Keep in mind that you will need the screws and T-nuts for this. Another useful addition will be enclosure, and you will have a lot of materials to choose from. Even something like wood can be used, assuming you will not go over 100 degrees Celsius. Middle tier would be acrylic sheets, and the high tier would be polycarbonate. If you want to save a bit of money and still want to enclose your printer with polycarbonate, you can buy hollow ones that are used for enclosing the greenhouse. Overall, I think this is the best upgrade for the money spent, especially if you want to print something like ABS or ASA. Second on that list, the AC bed. Compared to 24-volt bed, this one is super fast to heat up. It takes around 8 seconds to reach 60 degrees from the ambient temperature. There are 2 options here. First one is generic 300 by 300. Don't make mistake and buy 330 as it will just not fit. Generic one costs around $20 to $30, but you will also need to spend around $5 to $10 for a solid state relay. Premium option is Keenovo silicone heater specifically made for Tronxy bed, and it costs around $90. Don't forget to get thermal fuse. The funny way solid state relays often fail is that they stay on forever, and you definitely don't want that to happen. Thermal fuses cost around $5 for a pack of 10. Third upgrade is the air filter. It costs around $15 to $25, and it's a great way to reduce the amount of fumes you will be getting from your 3D printer. It does almost nothing if you don't have an enclosure though. This is why it's further down the list, and I'm not planning on ever printing ABS, so this is something for me that's not really going to be useful. Fourth upgrade is the remote static cooling system. That costs around $30 just for the fans. Plus, you will have to print quite a big air duct for it. But overall it's a pretty good upgrade for your cooling system if you plan on going fast. That being said, I didn't notice any significant issues with a single cooling fan. But then again, I'm not printing that fast yet. You will also need to have an enclosure to mount it. CPAP cooling system can also be considered as an upgrade. However, it's a lot louder and costs around $80. Now it's time for wild upgrades. Something that exceeds $100 but can also give you huge quality of life improvements. Very first thing I would recommend, if you have a lot of money to spend, is to make yourself a kinematic bed. It isn't in the official repository, but there are community mods that you can use as a 3-point mounting system for your bed. This is also called a thru auto bed leveling. Consider that you will need at least 3 linear rails for this, 3 stepper motors and a motherboard capable of driving at least 6 stepper motors. You will be looking at around $200 to spend. Keep in mind that for Kinematic Bed to work, you will need an absolutely rigid and flat bed, so something like 8mm thick machined aluminium should do the job. Second thing in this category is quad gantry. Like the name suggests, it requires 4 stepper motors to drive the XY gantry, as well as the whole bunch of 3D printed parts and new belts. To make this upgrade, I think you'll need at least $100, and that doesn't cover the cost of the motherboards. If you ever plan on building Kinematic Bed or quad gantry, go straight for the Octopus Pro. Last but not least is the 48V conversion. This is probably the most expensive upgrade that you can do to a printer, as you will need a motherboard capable of working on high voltage, 48V power supply, and at least 2 new stepper motor drivers like TMC 5160. Of course, you will also need the stepper motors that won't blow themselves up. I roughly estimated it to cost around $250 to $300, considering you already have a motherboard capable of high voltage. As you can see, quite a lot of upgrades depend on the motherboard, so this is why for me it's the most logical as the first step of upgrades. This is also why motherboard is the first on the upgrade list, and this is also why I bought the Octopus Pro. Simply because it's not that much more expensive, but opens up a lot more possibilities. I have also gotten myself a CAN bus boards, though I can't really say it's an upgrade, it's just a quality of life improvement, so I don't have to route cables each time I want to change anything on my printhead. That will be it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you do, hit that subscribe button as it will help me get motivated to do more videos in the future.